In this video, we're going to have a look at some bivariate data analysis, starting off with using Excel to create a scatter plot and add a line of best fit onto that scatter plot. So you can see that we've got our set of data and we've got heights and weights. So within the data set, the height is going to be the X variable and the weight is going to be the Y variable. So we're going to see if a person's weight is going to be dependent on their height. So first of all, we're going to start off by having a go at creating a scatter plot in Excel. So to create the scatter plot, we want to highlight our data, so both our X and our Y data, and then we want to go up to Insert. Then we want to go across to the graph area and select the scatter plot, and just the first scatter plot that comes up, which is just your normal average scatter plot. So after you've selected it, because the data has already been highlighted, it is going to insert a scatter plot for you based on that data. Now that is going to be your very basic scatter plot that you then need to go and make some formatting changes to make it more suitable for what you'll be after. So the first thing you can do is you can add in a title, and the title is going to be relevant to what the scenario is going to be. So this one, heights and weight, we can say that it's going to be student height and weights. Alright, so now that we've done that, and we just did that by double clicking into the title that was already there, a scatter plot needs to have some X and Y axes labeled. So along the top, if you go to the chart design tab, if it hasn't already been selected, then you can go to add chart element, and in there you've got axes title, and you've got primary and horizontal and primary vertical. The horizontal will add in your x-axis label and the vertical will add in your y-axis label. So you want to go ahead and add in both of those. And then you want to go in and add in a title to describe what data is on those labels. So if you collect it and double click into it, you'll be able to go in and edit it. So on the x-axis, we've got our heights. And then on the y-axis, we have got our weight. Right, so if we have a look at this scatter plot, we can see that we've got all of our data bunched up here, and then we've got a lot of empty space between our data and the y-axis. We don't want all of that empty space in our scatter plot because it makes the area where the data is all condensed up and very hard to see. So what you want to do is you want to be able to go and edit that data to remove some of that empty space. And you do that by changing your scale. So in Excel, the default will go from 0. And because we've got heights, most of our heights are between 150 and 200, that creates our empty space. So we want to change our scale so it starts at 150. So if you click on your scale, and right click and go format axes, it will bring up the format bar off to the side if it's not already there. So under the fourth tab, the axes options, you can nominate the minimum and the maximum. So at the moment the maximum is 250 and the minimum is 0. But we don't want it to start at 0, we want it to start at 150. So we'll go ahead and change that to 150. And we might change the maximum, well, the maximum automatically changed to 210, which is suitable. So now we can see our data a lot better than what we have been able to do when the scale was starting at 0. Now we could do the same thing for our y-axis with our weight. There's no need for our weight to start at 0 because no one's going to have a 0 weight. So we could start it at 40. And then it automatically adjusts to 110. And again, that allows us to get a better picture of the data because we're cutting out some of that dead space that we don't need in our scatter plot. So now we've got our labels, we've got our title, and we've got a scatter plot that fits in the data. There's a couple of other adjustments that you can make to that scatter plot. The first one is we've got our grid lines. But if you want to add in more grid lines, if you go back up to add chart element under the chart design tab and go down to grid lines, you can add in minor horizontal and minor vertical. That then adds in more grid lines so you can get a better sense of being able to read values off of the scatter plot. So if we make that bigger for the moment, you can see now that we've got a lot more grid lines in there that we can go and use to be able to read what those values are going to be. You can also do some editing of the scatter plot. So the labels you can make bigger. You could put it in bold if you wanted to for the title. You can change the color of your dots. But again, using the format bar across to the side. If you don't have access to that, you can always right click and go format data series and it'll bring it up for you. You can go up to the paint bucket for the colors and go into marker, and then you can change the color of the marker if you wish. You can also change the size of the marker. So there's a lot of different formatting options for the scatter plot that you can play around with. So one feature we can add to our scatter plot, and we'll just make it bigger so we can see this feature, is if we right click on one of our data points, we can go add a trend line. Now that is going to add in the line of best fit that's calculated using the least squares regression line. So that's going to be going through the middle of our data. So again, if you don't like the formatting, you can right click and go format trend line, going across to the paint bucket, and then you can choose a color. So you might choose to go with a different blue. You can increase the width. If you want a solid line instead of a dotted line or vice versa, you can play around with the formatting for that. Staying with our format options, if we go back into trend line options at the end, down the bottom, there's a couple of options you can display. One of them is the equation of the chart. There's a couple of different options that you can display. One of them is to display the equation on the chart. So that is going to give you the equation of that line of best fit that you have, that the Excel has calculated. So it comes up pretty small. So if you want to, you can select it and make the font bigger. You can also move the equation around depending on where you would like it. So that gives you the equation. And now that's the same equation as you would calculate using the least squares regression line method. And is sometimes a good feature for you to have on the scatter plot. So that is some features of creating a scatter plot in Excel. Just remember that when you are creating scatter plots in Excel, you do need to have the same features as if you were drawing them. So you need to have a title, you need to have labels on your axes, and you need to make sure that you are choosing an appropriate scale. So that concludes our example of how do we create a scatter plot.